Good evening, everyone. My name is Griffin Thurkel, and again, I am an undergraduate student here at Liberty University Online, studying a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology, focusing on Christian counseling. Also, I greatly apologize if there's background noise here, but I have a 2-year-old. It's a little difficult to keep him super quiet, but please forgive me. But for this assignment, I had the opportunity to rewatch my previous video assignment in this class. That was kind of an introductory video assignment for psychology and kind of some previous beliefs and ideas that I had about the field. So I'm very much looking forward to getting to discuss these new questions after having reviewed my previous video. The first question is, how has my understanding of psychology changed since the first video? It has changed drastically in regards to understanding the sheer amount of physiology, interaction of chemicals, and different enzymes and things within the body that actually have to do with how our emotions and how our psychology are perceived and how we actually act. I never had the opportunity to dive into that, and it's interesting because when I watched my first video, I actually discussed that. I wanted the opportunity to understand more of the science behind psychology and not just the behaviors themselves. So it was wonderful to have the opportunity to read through the book and learn so much more about how the chemicals within our brain actually can affect how we act. The next question was, if I could redo my first video, what would I add or say differently? I would say, in regards to doing or saying anything differently, the most important part of that would be I seem to have the idea that psychology and counseling are the same thing in that video, and they're definitely not. Counseling, after taking this course, it definitely appears to me that psychology is more of a scientific understanding of what counseling addresses, is what I believe after taking this class. So one could almost argue that counseling is more like a practical application, and psychology is a foundational understanding of the science for it. So I would adjust my definition of psychology if I could redo my first video, because I know that that's something I brought up in the first one. As far as key concepts or terms that were most impactful in changing the way I view psychology, there were two things specifically, and it's interesting because I kind of find them related, so to speak. The first thing that really jumped out to me was how perception is, because we all kind of have a general understanding of how we might perceive actions or people. I would argue that the average individual understands what perception is in regards to other individuals, like how we might, first impressions and things like that. Um, I loved having the opportunity to understand how perception is so much more than that, and how much it interacts with sensation and like all of the way that we perceive our environment. Like, it doesn't just have to do with individuals, but it also has to do with circumstances, an event happening, whatever it might be. And the moment that we perceive something occurring or another individual, our brain is already going through a process at an incredibly fast rate. It goes through all of these different steps to bring us to a conclusion where we create that impression, so to speak. It was incredible to get to read about that in chapter 7 on page 191 is where that chapter starts. But that was a wonderful thing for me to get to dive into deeper. Another one that I believe was kind of related with that was motivation. And the motivation chapter, which is chapter 5, starting on page 135, I thought was fascinating because the idea that motivation doesn't just have to do with, our our heart's desires. The book addresses, starting on page 135, some chapters within the Bible that have to do with our sinful nature can cause motivation to commit these sinful acts. But I thought that it was interesting to read through the chapter and then apply it in my everyday life as well, because motivation can also be impacted by what our beliefs are And I thought that chapter 5 and chapter 7 could integrate with each other quite well because I believe that they both address sinful nature or how God's creation can be perceived, so to speak. Because as sinful people, our motivations can always be perceived as selfish from the start. Like if we only act on our own desires, they will always be selfish and they will always be sinful because that's what we are. But if we act on what God desires and what God has created us to be, then our motivations are far more pure that way. But then again, they're not of ourselves. The other reason why I thought that they interacted well with each other is whenever we are perceiving other individuals or other events through the lens of our sinful heart, we may always have the tendency to view them towards the negative, and then our motivation might also always be towards the negative or the selfish. And I thought that perception through the lens of God and His creation and attempting to see others through His eyes instead of ours can also positively affect our motivations in life. Instead of trying to act in selfish altruism, trying to do something for somebody else, hoping that they'll do something for us in return, maybe there's the potential for just doing something good for others because it's the right thing to do instead of hoping for a positive outcome from it. The final question, because I'll try to wrap up here. Which area of psychology do I find the most interesting and why? It easily has to be personality. Personality is something I've always been fascinated with. How people are different and how God has utilized their personality towards something that will better His glory as well. I believe that it relates to how we perceive people as well, again, bringing up chapter 7, because when it comes to personality, everybody can be perceived differently. Even though you might be acting the same and just being your true self as God created you, you might be perceived differently by every single person on the planet due to their own experiences, how their brain might be functioning, whatever it might be. But as long as you are living as God intended you to, and His love and His light is what is shining through, then that's what matters at the end of the day. And I think the study of personality is very important to me just so that I can potentially study further and dive deeper into helping other people discover the personality that God put within them. That is the final question for this assignment, and I just want to say thank you so much for this course. I know we're winding down towards the end. I just want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being such an incredible instructor in this course, and God bless you. Thank you.